maybe we'd stand out here. It's so nice. We can stand here to begin. Wow. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for coming out this evening to hear from Steve Rosenberg, who I'll introduce in a moment. I want to acknowledge our Essex County DA, Paul Tucker. Thank you for being here, Paul. I think Mrs. Tucker is here as well. Thank you for being here as well. I want to say thank you to the Swampscott Police Department for their presence here tonight. We also have the Shirat Hayam lay security team. Many members of that lay security team are here tonight, so we want to thank the people who are in the room right now, but if you'll convey our thanks to those who are outside. Thank you very much. And I think I also see my colleague, Rabbi Cantor Idan Islander, who will help us close our program tonight. You know, I kind of know Steve. You probably know that he's the publisher of the Jewish Journal. And I usually do not like bios. But when I read this, I kept going, wow, wow, wow. So I'm going to read the bio that you shared with me, Steve. Steve Rosenberg is the publisher and editor of the Jewish Journal, a native of Swampscott. He holds a bachelor's degree in journalism from UMass Amherst and an okay, let's hear it for the Minuteman. And an MFA in creative writing from Bennington College. His extensive media management experience, having worked in print and broadcast journalism since 1981. I was alive, don't worry, I was alive then. Steve joined the Jewish Journal in 2017, and prior to his arrival, he served as a staff writer for the Boston Globe for 15 years. Steve was a member of the staff at the Globe that was awarded a Pulitzer Prize in 2014 for its coverage of the Boston Marathon bombings. Right? So this is why we do this. In addition, he has served as editor of the Jewish Advocate, managed 2 TV stations, and worked as a documentary filmmaker. He has contributed to numerous publications, including the New York Times, Haaretz, the Jerusalem Post. His broadcast work has been seen on CBS, WGBH, CNN, Fox News, and Israeli TV. Steve has reported extensively from Israel, the West Bank, and Gaza, and has made several films on Hamas and the United Nations Relief and Works Agency, or UNRWA. Did you know that? No. Some did. The board of the journal knew that. Closer to home, he has served as an adjunct professor at Salem State University and has also written and edited several books, including Middle Class Heroes, Voices from Boston's Suburbs. This is Steve Rosenberg, our neighbor in Swampscott and publisher of the Jewish Journal. So, you know, Steve, like tonight it's so complex, right? There's the brokenness in our hearts. There's the complexity in their minds. There's the constant reminder that Israelis always say to me, we don't despair. So I say to myself, well, then I can't despair. But such a host of feelings and emotions that we might feel that it can be challenging to move to the headspace, which we need to be in to communicate. But before we get into that, could you just give us like a brief overview? Where did you go in Israel? Who organized the trip? What was the purpose of the trip? Who did you meet? Just give us a brief framing for the talk tonight.
Sure. I organized the trip. I've been to Israel, we think 40 times, or something like that. But I've lived in Israel, lived in Tel Aviv and Jerusalem in the past. I have family, my sister, Phyllis, many of you know, she's been living in Tel Aviv for the last 4 years, and her daughters live there. So I have family there, I have close friends, close family. And this is just a very important story for the American Jewish community that it actually is underreported, I believe. And that's why I wanted to go. I wanted to find out what the mood was in Israel, what the impact of the war was in Israel, what the overall psychological impact was. given the trauma. So I went, I organized the whole trip myself. I set up all the interviews myself. I have very good contacts there. I spoke with the country's leading psychiatrists about the psychological impact of the attack. I spoke to the leaders of Brothers and Sisters in Arms, which is a civil organization, a volunteer organization that has 15,000 volunteers. I spoke with former Prime Minister. I met with former Prime Minister Ehud Olmert in his Tel Aviv office. I spoke with the former head of the Shin Bet, Israel's Internal Secret Service Agency, similar to what we have here, the FBI. I spoke with other security experts. I toured the South. I went, so in this video that we're going to see, it's about a 9-minute video, you'll see me touring the South, Kibbutz Be'eri, where over 100 people were killed, about 1/10 of the population by Hamas. I went to the Nova Music Festival site, where 360 people were killed, which was the largest single mass murder of Jews since the Holocaust. Then I went to, you'll see, a place called Hostages Square. This is where the families of the hostages have been sleeping since October. And it's also become an area where people come to process the whole October 7th attack, and the idea that over 200 hostages were taken that day and more than 100 remain in Gaza. That is also strategically placed, that Hostages Square, right across the street from Israel's Pentagon, the Kiryat. So they know that Israel's top military leaders are watching. I also got a chance in this video, you'll see, to visit a soldier, Yoav, who lost a leg, and he'll tell us how it happened. And just incidentally, Yoav says hello to everyone. He spent 16 years as a camper at Camp Ramah. His mother was an administrator there. Wow. So he knows Boston well, he misses Quincy Market, and he loves Salem.
So before we get to the video, just a show, how many of you have been to Israel since October 7th? All right, so Steve is professional, preeminent journalist with extensive background reporting from Israel, in Israel, and on Israel. And we haven't been there, and you're going to take us there, both through this video and your talk tonight. So let's take a look at the video, and if we'll turn the lights out and we'll start the video.
Great. Hi. It's hard to imagine a place where hundreds of people were murdered in a matter of an hour or two. But if there is a place on earth that's the most well documented at this time, it is this place, the site of the Nova Festival on October 7th. The pictures here are of all of the people who were murdered in the most horrific ways, the most horrific behavior man can exhibit.
In this community, they stopped the car coming in and they took control of the car. They killed the individual in the car, and they were able actually to open the gate, and then they managed to keep the gate open and kill the people and the security people here as well. And then from here, they spread out within the community.
How many attacked here?
There were about 70 people who attacked here. In this
70.
community, 70 terrorists.
And
And it took about, all in all, about 18 hours before the attack was finished.
Where was Vivian's body found, and what condition was her body?
It was found in this house. I can't say on record where it was due to the family's request. It was burned severely, as we talked about. As many of the bodies were burned to the extent that there was no remains. So we had to bring in, like we talked about, special teams of archaeologists to identify what we could. At times, all that was left was teeth. So this was a similar case, and here it took a month and a half to identify the body. So for a month and a half, we didn't know if Vivian is kidnapped or if she was murdered in her house.
This is a tunnel that was built here at Hostages Square. Is this your first time here?
Yes,
What are you feeling now? What are you thinking about when you see all this?
I feel very sad and very frustrated. Today, this is my first time I came here after a very long time of not being ready, not feeling ready. Yesterday was my grandson's first birthday, and he's just one day older than Phil Bibas, whose birthday today. And I just couldn't stay home.
So you're a therapist. What do you believe is the psychological impact of October 7th on Israel, on Israelis?
I believe it's first loss of security, of sense of security, and break of trust and authorities and like the world as it was before October 7th. And for long term, we need to wait and see. I believe we just have a post-traumatic society here.
Where are you from, Maya?
I'm from Nir Moshe, that is 7 kilometers and 200 meters from the border. We are not considered a danger zone, but my family is from Kfar Aza and from Nir Oz. And I lost friends, I lost family. Some were murdered, some were kidnapped. Kfar Aza, there are still 5 hostages. This is Elad, he is the brother of my sister-in-law Karmit. They're from Nir Oz. Him and his mother were taken hostage. His father, Rami, was murdered. His mother was released with the first deal after 49 days. She is still hospitalized. Her condition, her health condition is still very, very bad. She is still fighting for her life. She lost 20 kilos in 49 days. Elad has been there 104 days. We know his situation is not good. We last heard, got a signal of life on January 5th. I don't know what else to say. We need to bring them home. He needs a hearing aid. He lost a lot of weight. We saw it in the video. We are very worried about him, and we need him home now.
And then someone shot an RPG missile that hit right between us. And I remember flying in the air, and I landed on my back, and I saw that my leg was, crooked. I saw a bone, and I saw my foot, in a crooked position. And the first thing that I think about is the next hit, because the natural response to an RPG is another RPG a couple of seconds later. That's how they roll.
No, it can be hard to talk when you get emotional, but we're gonna try. You can see from the beginning of the video that you were in the area known as the Gaza envelope, the numerous cities, towns, moshavim, kibbutzim that surround the Gaza Strip. We saw video, as you said, from the Supernova site and from Kibbutz Be'eri. And we also know that from trips, as you pointed out in the video, that half the trip is getting to the site and the conversations. And I just wonder if there's anything beyond what you shared with us in the video that you want to, take us back to anything that you learned about October 7th, whether there's anything you want to share in that regard about the attack itself on October 7th.
I could just go over what's been reported in Israeli media and American media in case you haven't read about it. The attack began early in the morning, shortly, sometime before 6:30. 3,000 rockets apparently were fired from Gaza. Right at the same time that was happening, Israel was overwhelmed by all the rockets, and their Iron Dome couldn't handle it all. At the same time, Hamas sent a couple of, at least two, drones that were able to make their way across the border. And they were able to, they were equipped with bombs. They were able to blow up the video surveillance at the border. They were also able to blow up the remote controlled automatic machine guns at the border that would have prevented such an attack. So at the time, the video went out. There was no way to defend the border. And Hamas was able to quickly blow up sections of the border fence, and thousands of Hamas terrorists stormed the border. They stormed right past this border where 16,000 Gazans entered Israel every day. They worked in the local area, and they also sought medical attention. So while all that was happening, the terrorists started reaching nearby villages, kibbutzim, moshavim. They were able to get to a military base, several military bases, in fact, that they took over, and lots of horrible things happened there. But one of the military bases, they destroyed the communication system there. And at that point, the communications between Tel Aviv, the Kiryat, the main military center, and the southern command of the IDF were interrupted. And essentially, there was very little communication. They could not see anything. Their radar wasn't working. And that allowed the terrorists to roam the area for hours and hours and hours.
You know, in the video that you showed us, the psychologist talked about the impact, the psychological impact, and the primary phrase that I recall was that he said that the loss of a sense of security. And when you hear about as grisly as the attack was and hard to take, we also hear about the sophistication of that attack. And so, you know, tell us a little bit more about the psychological impact that you felt that you know, from your interactions with Israelis.
With Israelis, and I was able, this is an underreported story because we hear so much about the war. We hear about what's happening in Gaza, but we don't hear so much about how Israelis are doing, how they're coping. 200,000 Israelis have been relocated. They're essentially homeless. They're living in hotels. 15,000 are living in Eilat. Another 10,000 are living in the Dead Sea hotels. I don't know if has anybody been there? I've been there. And then they're living in cities such as Tel Aviv. You know, this is the antithesis of where the bucolic countryside where they live, down south and also up north. Northern communities were evacuated also. So I did speak with some of the country's top psychiatrists and psychologists, and there's an estimate that as many as 600,000 people now have PTSD since October 7th. Tens of thousands of Israelis have sought mental health assistance. There's a big increase in anxiety, sleep deprivation, depression. Not all the numbers are in. It can't be qualified in numbers, but the country has changed. It's a social contract in the country, and there's Israelis here who could talk about it much better than I could, that calls for the government and the army, the IDF, to protect its citizens. And it also calls for the government and, if necessary, the army to return its citizens from danger. And that social contract was broken on October 7th and remains broken for millions of Israelis. There's a deep distrust in the government. After October 7th, polls have consistently indicated that the prime minister has about 20% support, 80% want him to either resign or quit when the war ends. So there is a deep distrust. There's of the government. There's just a sense of security and trust just has been upended there.
Right. So it sounds like, you painted not, the picture that not only has our faith in our security been shattered, that no matter where I'm walking at any place in Israel, it could be that if they were able to infiltrate, they could infiltrate here as well. And then the very institution in which I had placed my faith to protect me has let me down, both the government and I don't know the degree of critique of the IDF there, but the soldiers are fighting now. So I imagine there's a tremendous amount of support and unity.
There is.
So then my sense is that occupies one part of the body. And at the same time, another part of the body is able to create an art installation of an empty Shabbat table, to create I would call it an art installation of a Gaza tunnel for people to experience that. So
to process,
yeah,
to help process their emotions.
wow. So tell us more about the other side of how Israeli public and the society is responding to attacks.
I guess the big takeaway for me was the remarkable unity in the country. I have never experienced or witnessed this sense of brotherhood, this sense of urgency to help fellow man. It was something so inspirational. It's very emotional. People have to volunteer. People have to drive their neighbor somewhere if they need a ride. People hurry to make meals for soldiers. Everywhere you go, there's little stands for soldiers if they're hungry, if they need anything, it's all there. There's this one organization, Brothers and Sisters in Arms, that they organized 15,000 volunteers who did everything from create hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of thousands of meals to getting people medical treatment, to creating a whole psychological center at in different cities for people who need help. They helped extricate as many as 100,000 people out of their homes in the days after October 7th, because a lot of people were stuck in their safe rooms and they didn't know. Their phones were dead. They didn't want to leave the safe room. And these are IDF veterans, and they went in and they knew how to do it and they brought them out. They're a remarkable organization. They're just one of many organizations doing incredible things. So I went there because I needed to go there, but I was so inspired by the people there, I have to tell you.
Well, let's stick with this for a little bit. I mean, I've heard of, you said Brothers and Sisters in Arms, and I guess I've heard of a group called Brothers in Arms that
now it's the same
was
organization.
very active in leading the protest against the judicial reform.
They were.
And
So
is there a link between the two organizations?
Yeah, it's the same organization. So as many of you know, last year, 2023 was a very challenging year for Israelis. The main issue was the question of the judicial reform. They wanted to change the way judicial system works. Long day. This brought out hundreds of thousands of people every Saturday night for almost 40 straight weeks, right up until the weekend of October 7th. And you'd have massive marches in Tel Aviv and also other major cities like Jerusalem, Haifa, and in smaller cities like Yavne, Beersheba, Sfat even, Eilat. So this was led by IDF veterans, high-ranking IDF vets, and also high-tech people. And also, it brought out a lot of who were opposed to it because they felt like the democracy in the country would erode under these kind of changes. And it brought out a lot of issues that had been at the kind of buried, social issues. And the country was just very, very divided. You had families divided. You had spouses even divided on the subject, and brothers and sisters. And, it just made for a very challenging year. And some called it like a civil war, even though, and fortunately, no one got killed. No one got killed, but there was some very ugly incidents almost every day for a long time. And then on October 7th, the group reorganized and sent out an email to tens of thousands of people who come Saturday night and said, we are now a social service agency. We now serve the country. Everyone should report who's in the IDF. And
Right, because there was a lot of people talking about they weren't reporting for some training exercises during this judicial reform.
everybody reported. They had more people than they had uniforms for. And they went to work to become a social service agency right away, a civilian to serve the civilian population, to do things that the government was unable to do because of such an unprecedented attack. Like I said, they were able to get all those people, 100,000 people out of their homes, which was amazing. They built a database in a matter of days, really hours, to try to identify, and they did. They identified the at least 200 people who were taken hostage. They did that through computers and high tech and artificial AI. And the Mossad visited them and said, you know what? You're ahead of us. Keep doing that.
Wow.
And then they set up a whole headquarters outside of Tel Aviv where 15,000 people were packing meals, driving, everything that the country needed. People needed psychological help. They found it. People needed medical help. People needed clothing. A lot of people left with no shoes. They were in their pajamas. So they had nothing. So, people needed glasses, So it's amazing what they did and what they're doing. So the resilience of the people is my big takeaway. I felt so proud there.
Yeah, I mean, it's you almost want to maybe you'll go back and make the documentary film about this because, just to recall, right? Just you said that this was not a governmental agency. It was something that had just formed within the last year. I don't know how much internal funding it even had, but my guess is that when they were organizing against the judicial reform, that a lot of people quit their jobs. A lot of people worked a lot less, devoted their time because they cared so much about the country that they loved and had served and were going to raise their children in. and then to pivot on a dime and transfer all those resources and their organizational skill set they had kind of created and galvanized without having official status, and turn it towards helping the people, and to be able to do it so well and so quickly, it is very moving to hear you bring us into that space. So what else? I mean, that's a very hopeful,
Yeah.
a response. And
Yeah,
you know that when you meet the needs of people immediately and so quickly, it benefits them in the long term. But you were going to say something more.
Yeah, and compare that to America. You know, we're dealing with actually an unexpected avalanche of anti-Semitism. We've had enough before this. But what transpired since October 7th has really caused a lot of us to think about our Jewish identity and about Israel, and just our role in life, the horrific atrocities committed. We're dealing with that also. We're dealing with those pictures that were live streamed by Hamas on social media. Still, so we have our own issues that we're dealing with here, if we're those of us who are really involved. So it was very helpful for me to be there. It was helpful to see such a resilient population, a population that really was there for one another. I remember just a couple of weeks ago, I was at a vigil for the hostages on a Saturday night, and there were over 100,000 people in Tel Aviv. I went to two of them on two consecutive Saturday nights. And this was the second one. And I was walking toward the back, and I saw all kinds of Israelis, white, black, straight, gay. People had tears in their eyes, and they cared about their fellow man. They cared about their neighbor. This was Ahavat Yisrael. This is the manifestation of Ahavat Yisrael, loving. How do you describe it?
Love of your fellow Jew.
Yeah, I saw it.
Yeah.
It's remarkable.
Yeah, it just makes it, so God forbid, but occasionally I have to go to a shiva in a really tragic loss. And the power of the mourner to actually comfort those who are there to provide the comfort is incredible. And it almost sounds that there was a little bit of that for you, that when you're away from Israel, your heart breaks, you're worried about what's happening there. They've suffered tremendously, and you go there and you feel strengthened, revitalized, supported by the resilience and the power of the Jewish people and the Israeli people. Because we know that 20% of Israel is Arab, and I think that we could talk a little bit more about the whole country another time, but
Right.
there's another story probably to tell about how the Arab sector is responding, who remains very supportive of the country overall.
Yeah, and just to go there, you can't do anything about it. You can't change anything, but to see it is very important. I encourage everybody to go. It's really a good time to go. It's safe, if you can believe that.
Maybe you'll organize the Steve Rosenberg mission because it sounds like you know how to put together a trip and the people to see. So, so is there? We've talked about the past. We actually went back a year and we started to talk about a little bit of judicial reform. We talked about the day of October 7th. We talked about the aftermath and the resilience of the Israeli people. You met with very high-ranking people, a former director of the Shin Bet, a former prime minister. Through all of your conversations, whether with officials, former officials, or regular people on the street, what do you think about what comes next? And if you have any sense about what their thoughts are about, the next phase of the conflict or the next phase of the relationship between Israel and Hamas?
I think the big focus, and this is been documented in polls, and in a recent poll, is the big focus is repairing the social contract. And you can't, they're not gonna defeat Hamas tomorrow. You know, Hamas is a whole other animal. And the head of the Shin Bet, the former head of the Shin Bet, and also Ehud Olmert, the former prime minister, said Hamas is already defeated in a lot of ways. I mean, they don't have an air force. They don't have a navy. They don't have tanks. Israel can handle that threat right now. But a big part of the big focus now is to get the hostages back and to start the healing in the country. And how to do that, it'll probably be a very large prisoner trade of convicted killers, people who did very horrible things, mass murders. So that is what Hamas has spelled out, and that's what a small majority of the Israeli population is leaning toward. But the number one thing for most Israelis is to begin the healing, bring these people back, and then deal with Hamas. And that's a whole other thing, you know. When I was there, the word came out that like as many as 500 miles of tunnels under Gaza.
Right.
And I believe it would take America years to destroy them. So you have to be realistic in all this. And I think Israelis are.
Well, it sounds like some really competing objectives, right? On one hand, we want to restore the sense of security, and we want that restored for us.
Right.
That means eliminating Hamas, whatever that, however you defined it, or victory. And at the same time, we want the hostages back. And those don't seem to be fully compatible.
Right.
Because to get the hostages back, you need to negotiate. And that means Hamas isn't going to negotiate and say, we'll give up, we'll disappear. So those seem like some really incompatible. And it sounds, to me then that also then leads to the sense of that really requires therefore leadership. When you have to bring the country to get behind two competing values and ultimately support something, that it speaks to the need for leadership. And I don't know how much a sense of leadership or direction you were able to feel in terms of being able to forge a path forward that was going to be able to account for some of these competing goals that will make, I think, life really difficult from a political perspective.
Right. Right now, to be honest, and I know there was a lot of Bibi supporters here, probably, there's not a lot of support for him in Israel anymore. There was until October 7th, but I think a lot of people are disappointed. I'm not talking out of school here. A lot of people are disappointed with the way he's managed the war, the way he's connected with people since the war, and his government. I mean, 11 out of 16 of his cabinet ministers just attended a forum that was promoting the resettlement of Gaza by Jews, by Israelis. And there's a disconnect here. There's a disconnect I believe, between the masses and such a minority. But such a minority is making huge decisions for the government, the cabinet ministers. So this is what Israel is dealing with, a very unusual government now cobbled together with messianic, religious, right-wing people, including two, Itamar Ben-Gvir and Bezalel Smotrich, who were not qualified to serve in the army.
Really?
Yeah. And were arrested. I think Gvir's rap sheet is several pages long. He's an attorney now. So there's a real disconnect between what's happening in the government and what's happening with the rest of the country, I believe.
Yeah, well. Which will then lead, but the future will be, is always uncertain and will be interesting. And in the present, it sounds like that sense of unity behind the war effort remains very strong. And then as the war continues and extends, these questions of political support are beginning to become louder and stronger. It sounds like
Yes,
we're getting a feel from you.
there's a call for elections, there's a call for resignation. We'll see what happens.
Mhm, mhm. Through your eyes, we've had the benefit of seeing a little bit through your witness and your stories with people, this encounter with the evil and being able to kind of walk us into a home where somebody's life was taken in such a gruesome and brutal way is incredibly devastating. There's a lot of darkness, a lot of heaviness in our hearts. You've also had a little bit of the resilience. Is there anything, what else gives you hope, or what else gives you strength? Are there individual like encounters or anecdotes or stories that you heard that you want to share with us tonight?
Yeah, I spent a lot of time in Tel Aviv, and it was amazing to see this city, which again, I encourage everybody to visit. It's a remarkable city. The building is amazing, very expensive now. There's a new subway that was just put in 4 months ago. It's gleaming, brand new. And I took a subway one night just for the heck of it from downtown Tel Aviv to Jaffa. In 19 minutes, I got there. And there I was, right in the backyard of Jonah and the whale in 19 minutes.
Wow.
I had a friend who invited me to a party. I was like, okay, I know about Israeli parties. I'll go to an Israeli party. Instead, it was a thing called a meetup, which I didn't know about, but apparently it happens sometimes. And
your wife is here.
yes, so all the people, all the Israelis there was about 10 of them in a restaurant meeting up for the first time and just becoming friends. And it was
Strangers,
total strangers. And within 30 seconds, the person next to me, the guy next to me realized that he was working in the same building as the woman who was sitting next to me. That woman told everybody that she had 5 children: Abraham, Yitzhak, Yaakov, Sarah, and Rivka. And the woman who organized this told me, her name is Rachel Cohen. And she said, I just want to bring people together. I just thought it was a really beautiful thing. Everybody became best friends in about a minute. It's just, that's kind of a glimpse of how Israeli society can be. That was beautiful. And then I was just out walking. I stumbled into a nightclub. I saw people dancing. I was just inspired by that. It was great. It's like people are, under the worst of circumstances, people are just continuing on and trying to get everything out of life that they can. Try to find hope.
Which really, important message for all of us,
Yes.
When we had a bat mitzvah here on October 14th, and how do you celebrate? And I think that example is exactly what the message was coming back from Israel was, you guys can celebrate, so you better not lose that opportunity, and you better do it to the fullest of your extent, because you can, and appreciate that you can. And it sounds like even Israelis who, if you look at that nightclub just from the video, everybody must have had a child, a daughter, or a cousin, or a neighbor who was in Gaza at that very moment, and yet they're like, because we're not serving in Gaza, we need to go out and celebrate because they can't, type of thing.
Exactly.
Which is really inspiring. So before we open it up for questions, is there anything else that we haven't cover that any other stories or anecdotes, like I said, that you want to, you know,
I think
share with that? We feel like we really
covered it.
walked with you,
Yeah.
you know, in these little moments. It's a really beautiful story then for us to end the formal part on of you being invited to go out to dinner and to be able to illustrate the value of Achavat Yisrael, the love of the Jewish people and the unity of the Jewish people, both through the work of, say, Brothers in Arms and how they, as brothers and sisters in arms, and responding to the trauma and the conflict. And then on a micro level, that 10 strangers can be invited to go meet up, and even a friend from America can show up and join the crowd of strangers.
Absolutely.
And fit in. So I think we're going to open up for questions. I think we're going to take it on both sides. Steve, my recommendation would be to take 2 questions at a time so that you can kind of feel both. If you prefer to take one at a time, you'll do that. You can
Whatever.
respond immediately. But here's what I'm going to ask is, we're only going to have questions, no statements, no comments, no personal opinions. Find a way to frame your personal opinion as a question, because we are here to hear Steve Rosenberg talk about having his feet on the ground in Israel for 2 weeks. You're not here to hear me talk or any of our people. So if you have a question, we've got Diane Knopf over here, we've got Mara over here, and we'll go ahead and take the question.
I want to say one thing though.
Oh.
I'm wearing this chain, and the first day I was in Israel, I met with Brothers and Sisters in Arms, and the fellow who leads the organization, Ronen Kohler, took this off of his neck and gave it to me. It says, "Bring them home now."
Really? Bring them home now, and from the head of
Yeah.
Brothers and Sisters in
And
Arms.
across Israel, hundreds of thousands of Israelis are wearing this in solidarity and unity for the hostages in Gaza.
Wow. All right, Margaret Summer.
Hi, good evening. I'm thinking about the phrase, never again. I have a voice problem, never again. And I was horrified at the image of Jews hiding in their safe rooms, hiding from the terrorists. I always thought every IDF veteran, everybody in the country would have a gun in their home. I would have pictured, if it was before October 7th, if you told me that was going to happen, I would have said, are you kidding? They will come out shooting and kill the terrorists. I was horrified that people were cowering in their homes. So my question is, since October 7th, are people armed in their homes? Do they have guns in their homes? Do they have, I don't want to see a Second Amendment in Israel. Here, yes. In Israel, no. So are people better prepared now? If there's a music festival, is it surrounded by security? If they're in their homes and people are coming into their village, not their village, but their kibbutz or the city, are they ready to go out and fight? What does never again mean?
It's a good question. There's a very strict gun law in Israel. So unlike here, it's very hard to get a gun. Most Israelis know how to use a gun because all Israelis are asked to serve in the army. Most do. But once they leave, it's not a gun culture outside of the army. More and more people are applying for gun permits now. But guns could not have saved anyone that day, really. Out of the 1,200 people who were killed that day, almost half were IDF soldiers and policemen who valiantly tried to save people's lives. But they did not have the right armor. The Hamas people came with rocket RPGs, which are rocket propelled grenades. They're missiles shot on shoulder fired missiles, which are set up to destroy homes and damage tanks. They were shooting them at people. So you can't defend yourself against an RPG, and they were so yeah, in some there is a bit of an increase, especially in the West Bank. Itamar Ben-Gvir, who is charge of his own militia, apparently. I mean, he's really, Idan could tell us better, but he was able to get 10,000 guns distributed. I think it was a mistake, if you ask me, but because a lot of these guns end up in terrorist hands, or in the black market, or in the mafia. And there's a price for everything.
I mean, my reaction to Margaret's question, you correct me if I'm wrong, is even though Kibbutz Be'eri was at 2.5 miles from the Gaza border, the faith that people had in the kibbutz security, and primarily, and more than that, really in the IDF to keep them safe, was so strong, they didn't need to train to protect themselves in their home, or perhaps have weapons necessarily. And that helps me understand just what it means to have that sense of security shattered.
Exactly. They had basic security, but that was overwhelmed right away, and the security staff couldn't even get to their guns.
Right. Wow. Mara, did you have another song?
Despite the long and difficult negotiations and relationship between Israel and Palestine, and the recent facts of the battle, it seems perfectly clear that Israel is losing the PR battle around the world. When you spoke to normal Israelis or government officials, do they realize that? And do they have any thoughts about it?
That's a good question. It's a frustrating question. Question I've been asking Israeli officials for at least 30 years. And I even put to the former Israeli ambassador to England a couple of years ago. I said, why don't you have in America 100 people spread out in every major city, connected to the media, connected to print and broadcast media, with relationships long before there's a conflict. Long before there's a conflict. I went to a conference a year ago in Jerusalem, and I sat with the minister, the diaspora minister, who also handles a big, supposed to do the hasbara, public relations. And I asked him his budget. He declined to tell me. He said, I don't know. I said, how is it that you're a minister, you don't know your budget, or you don't want to tell me? So I don't know how it is. I know this is on the record. Are there any reporters still here? This is off the record. Okay? How is it that the Jews can invent Madison Ave but can't do public relations in Israel? That's what I want to know. That's my question. That's off the record.
Thanks. Diana or Mara, you have any other questions?
Hi, Steve.
Hi, Barbara.
I'm wondering about your small business people in Israel, how they're surviving the economy, your shoemaker or your dress shop owner or your hairdresser. What is life like there for them now? Because I'm just wondering about the economy.
It's starting to come back. In the smaller cities, it's much worse, I think. A lot of people stayed in their homes for weeks and months. But from what I can tell, it's starting to come back. It's taken a major hit, though. Everything's taking a major hit. People are not going out at night. They're starting to go out at night. Starting, but the war is still on. It's a very delicate balance you have, and it's very surreal. You have a war going on an hour, 70 minutes away from your home. And any minute you can hear sirens. And there's a threat up north also with Hezbollah, 150,000 missiles pointed at Israel, 30 or 40,000 Hezbollah soldiers, and then you have the West Bank. which could explode at any minute. You have Houthis shooting rockets from Yemen, hundreds of miles away toward Eilat, and you have Iranian proxies in Iraq and Syria shooting toward Israel. All at the same time, people are debating, well, should I go out tonight? Should I go have a cup of coffee? Should I meet my friend for a drink? People are starting to reach that point now, I believe, in Israel, are going out, especially during the day. At night, it's very quiet. So there is an impact. Yeah, of course.
Thank you for your the video. I'm going to squeeze in briefly just a few questions, and you can feel free to ignore some or all if they're beyond sort of the scope of your talk. But one is, one question I just kind of have to ask myself, what is taking so long? And I understand, to defeat Hamas, and I appreciate the complexity with the tunnels and that they're holding hostages, but presumably they're outmanned, they're outgunned. We can cut off food, we can cut off, communication. I'm curious about your thoughts of, what's taking so long. That's one. Two is, to build 500 miles of underground tunnel must, over 16 years, there must have been, it's a massive undertaking. There must have been, excavators and all sorts of equipment and people. And how did it go unnoticed for 16 years that they were building this extremely intricate, construction project? Who do you think would be the better U.S. president for candidate for president for Israel's security? And lastly, why, and you pardon my ignorance if I should know this, but why are some Arabs Israeli citizens and some are Palestinians? Why are some A and some B? Thank you.
Oh, wow. So I'm not going to touch the presidential election. But war.
But you are the publisher of a journal. There may be an opinion piece in October.
No, I don't think so. I can only talk. I mean, from just the security people I spoke with, there's not going to be a victory photo. There's not going to be, a photo that's going to go on the cover of the New York Times of Hamas raising a white flag. It's not going to happen. It's a different type of war. Think about Afghanistan. Think about Iraq. These are the wars that they're fighting now. It's not against, traditional armed countries with tanks and planes and big Navy vessels. These are people who pop out behind walls and shoot RPGs and rape people. It's a whole different game. So it's guerrilla warfare. This is probably the most intense guerrilla warfare of this century, for sure. So it's got to take a long time. I mean, the fellow who spoke on the video, Yoav, told me that he went house to house. I interviewed another soldier, and he told me the same thing. He went house to house. It's a very slow process of clearing each house. And in each house that they found, each house they found a lot of ammunition. And where was it? It was in the children's room. It was underneath the cribs. It was underneath their beds. It was RPGs. It was grenades. It was machine guns. And it's the same story I kept hearing over and over again. You're dealing with a militia. You're not dealing with an old-fashioned army. So it's going to take time. I don't know how they're going to do it. It's a really heroic mission. And there's a lot of security people who are saying we've done enough. Hamas is basically destroyed. That they're not going to threaten us that much right now. They need to be watched, but they're not going to do that again right now.
Steve,
Yes.
you encouraged people to go visit Israel at this time.
Yes.
Are there opportunities for people who are not Hebrew speaking to go for more than a week or two to actually help out?
Yeah, it's a good question.
And how do we find them?
I know there are a number of trips, and I know that the Jewish National Fund is accepting volunteers. I saw many throughout my time there. So I recommend the Jewish National Fund.
And if you talk to your fellow security volunteer, Irena Karasik, she has begun investigating how to go over to Israel and volunteer. And what she told me is that the program that she's been volunteered with in the past is so overwhelmed with volunteers that they asked her to delay until the fall. But I would speak to Irena for the details of the organization she works with.
I don't know the percentage. I think it's something like 13% of Israel's population is Arab. And I just wondered how they are responding to what happened and how they are being treated by the Israelis. I understand that there are a number of doctors. There was a program about female doctors and many Arab female doctors in Israel. As I said, I don't know the exact percentage of the population.
I think they're closer to 20%. Is that right, John?
Yeah.
And I think Israeli Arabs are well represented in professional fields. I think close to half of the doctors in Israel are Arab. And a majority of the pharmacists are Arab, especially in Jerusalem. Almost all the taxi drivers are Arab there. So I think that all the polls suggest they're feeling the same emotions as Israelis, and that they're feeling connected to Israel also as a country.
And are the Israelis responding positively?
Well, they're their neighbors. They're not new. They're not new there. So it's been going, they have had relationships forever there. So just because there's a war there, I don't think that they changed their relationship or their attitude towards their neighbors.
Yeah. I think we'll take maybe one more question. So between Diane and Mara, anyone else? Oh.
Steve, will you be reporting all these stories in the journal?
Thanks.
Sometime soon?
Yes. I am working on a very comprehensive piece now that will run next Thursday in the journal. We have a special 20-page pull-out section. You'll see my story and my photographs. I hope you read it. It'll take a long time to read also, but I hope you read it or read part of it. I think it'll reflect a lot of what we're talking about tonight and go a lot further as well.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
So stick around. Wait, we're going to wrap this up. I mean, we've just ended the Q&A, but we still want to. We're going to sing Hatikva to finish this.
Yeah.
But before we get there, my question is there anything that you took back that you would say, for those of us here on the North Shore, anything that we can be doing, should be doing, any messages that you want to convey back to?
Just hope. I think when I was horribly impacted by this, just like many of you in this room, it's hard to see this happen. It's hard to see such atrocities occur. And like I said in the video, it's hard to see man do this to fellow man. It's just, the people just filled with hope.
Mm.
And we're actually going to hear that song also.
Good. Yeah, and that's a good note for us to
Yeah,
end on.
yeah.
Great. So we're gonna invite Rabbi Cantor Idan Islander from North Andover to lead us in both a song about the Hasidics and Hatikva. When it comes to Hatikva, I'll ask that you rise. And at the conclusion of Hatikva, do we have a drone? Just a ladder. We're going to try to get a picture of what it looks like when we're all standing together in this moment. So just as you've asked us to stand in hope, we'll actually capture that on film. So get you mic'd in, and you need very good. Do you want to go down there, or stay here? Okay. Is the song for bringing the hostages home, is that a sit-down song? A sit-down, okay. And then we'll stand for Hatikva. Okay. Steve, that was very inspiring. Yeah.
Hey, okay. Thank you very much. Such an honor to be here today. Thank you, Steve. Thank you, Rabbi Rogozin, for leading the talk. And Steve, thank you for an inspiring talk. You brought me back home to Israel. Thank you also to all the volunteers that are in Israel right now. My wife and I, we have actually many friends that their sons are in Gaza right now. And some of them are in the north. And our friends, their parents don't even know where their sons are. It's a very, very tough situation. So the song I wanted to sing for you is Bring Him Home. You know the song, right? From Les Miserables. I hope I pronounce it correct. My French is not that great. But the song is really became an anthem this day for the return of the, I believe now it's 136 Israeli and American children, women, elders, and soldiers who are currently held hostage in Gaza. So we pray for their swift and safe return, bring them home. So there's also a verse in Hebrew, which I will. Oh, now, hear my prayer, in my need. You have always been there. He is young, he is afraid. Let him reign. Heaven bless. Bring them home. Bring him home. Bring them home. He's like the sun I might have known. If God had granted me a son, summers die one by one, how soon they fly on and on. And I'm on, and will be gone. Eloha, Shema Koli, Goalo, Yadecha El, Sai, Shemo Dako, Ad Yashub, El Beito, Shalom, Shalom, Shalom. לו אלוהים היה נותן, אז הוא הבן שאין לי אין, יצקה מול עיניי, עבדו אי שם כל שנותיי, בסוף ימיי לבוא ולך. Bring him a peace, bring joy. He is young, he is only a boy. You can take, you can give, let him be. Let him live. If I die, let him die. Let him live. Bring home, bring them home. Beshalom. Thank you. And as Rabbi Rogozin suggested, please rise to able for Hatikva, the whole Israel national anthem.
It will look better the more we squeeze together. And we remind ourselves that as we direct our eyes towards the flag, that this is Hatikva, this is the hope that Israel represents, a country of hope.
Please join me. All Sophia, oh Lord, תקראתנו, תקווה בת שנות אלפיים, להיות עם חופשי בארצנו, ציון וירושלים.
Thank you, Rabbi Cantor Islander. Thank you, Steve Rosenberger. And thank all of you for coming out this night. Have a good evening.